Start this build off, we have $2,300 of white oak, 8/4 inch that we need to rip all down a straight line again with hardwood that you buy from the supplier. Only one side is straight. So we got to run it through the table saw and make sure we get both ends straight before we then run it through the joiner. These are long pieces, and honestly right now I do have a small shop and I don't have an outfeed table. If you're doing this long term, and what I'll be transitioning to in the new space is definitely an outfeed table, that way these long boards are a lot easier. Same with this joiner, we're again having to really focus on being in sync and unison while running these through the joiner so that we get good glue ups. It's not the easiest, but we managed to definitely get it done here. After that's done, we're gonna get our Titebond 3 and spread it all out. Ethan decided to use a little piece of cardboard here, and I just came in with the old finger technique. And I told him it works a little better, so he switched to that as well. And that's why we wear dirty jeans, right? We can just wipe it off on our pants. So we're gluing all this up and hoping that we get a nice clean joint when we join it all together for our clamp. And I will say I wasn't very ecstatic about how it clamped up. But we managed to get it pretty dang close. It just did take a little bit of flattening after the fact. But this is something I need to get better at, especially for doing high-end furniture like this. So jumping up and down on it kind of helps, but not really. So I kind of edited out the part where I was very frustrated because we have a lot of wood with a lot of glue, but there's always a way to make solid wood turn out perfect in the end. I'm going to take my Festool track saw and cut down the ends, and I'm leaving it just a little long. And then moving to the base, I'm cutting all these pieces, and this base is actually very unique. I wanted to make it thicker than just 8/4. The client had given me a sample photo of what they wanted, and so that's what I was trying to replicate. So it took cutting a lot of these 8/4 pieces to length and then gluing them up into 2 thickness pieces, which you'll see in a second. But first, again, after cutting them all to size, we have to rip them all down. We ripped them all to 6 inches. That way they all were uniform and you didn't see different widths in the table legs. And if you've seen my other videos, you notice that I now have dust collection versus before I didn't. Even though there's still a lot of dust in the shop, it does make a huge difference. Now for the table legs, again, we're going to do the same process and run them all through the joiner. Take our glue all the panels up, and make sure that they're nice and tight. This did come out a lot better than the tabletop. Obviously, it's smaller pieces than running 10-foot sections, so this did come out much better. People ask me if we should use Titebond 2, Titebond 3. Again, I like using Titebond 3 and everything just to get that extra insurance. It's not necessary for interior furniture, but for a few extra bucks, why not have that reassurance in what you're doing? Now, this table, I didn't get to show you the example photo of what the client showed me, but it wasn't a perfect rectangle. It did have these tapers at the end. So I drew out a line that I thought matched pretty well, and then I'm using my jigsaw to take one cutoff piece and match it to every corner and then jig out this radius. This is exactly what the sample photo looked like, and so this is what I did. And it kind of gives it just a more unique flow to it, and you'll see with the legs kind of how it flows as well, so we're not just dealing with a rectangle table. So you remember that base, I told you I wanted to go thicker than 8/4. So we have 2 panels, and we're going to sandwich them together, clamp it, and that gives us one thick table leg. And you'll see after we take the router to this how much better it looks than just having an 8/4 leg. With a table this big, it's definitely better to have, it to look like it didn't skip leg day and that everything's proportioned. Taking a $150 round over bit that I bought from my local hardwood supplier and rounding up all these corners. This way I can get, especially on the top, a reveal that's round all the way and doesn't just round to a flat and then round on the bottom. And on the legs, I'm doing the same thing. And this is where it's starting to really look like a good piece. The problem with routing is I don't really like to go all the way up to the corners just in case I get tear out on the ends. And so you'll see right here, I have these little knobs that stick out. So I'm taking a rasp and filing it down to the exact dimension that I want before going to sanding. And that looks much better. Now for the table base, I have to use some hardware and figure out, well, how am I going to mount this? So using my metal bandsaw to cut off some pieces that I'm then going to drill some holes in so that I can mount them to the base with some threaded inserts, and then do the same thing on the top. So I didn't know if I wanted to do 2 or 3. I decided, you know what, let's just do 3 and make this thing extremely secure. It's extremely heavy, so I'd rather just have that extra insurance. So we're marking this out, drilling the holes, putting the threaded inserts in, and then making sure that everything fits. These metal brackets are going to be fixed to the base, and you'll be able to undo it from the tabletop. So if the clients move or they want to put the table in a different conference room or something, that it's easier to take apart again because it's so heavy, this is just definitely the right way to do it. Early on in my furniture making career, I wasn't always doing this. Why? Because it's an extra step. It costs a little more money on hardware. It's more time and labor. But this is the right way to build furniture, and this is the way that I will be doing it from here on out on all of my pieces. Now, since there's going to be outlets in the top, I had to drill a hole through the entire base so that the wire could then feed down through the leg and then into the floor outlet that they have without seeing them dangle under the table. In hindsight, I probably could have routed out before I glued them together, but I didn't. So I ended up drilling a hole through it. Now we're going to take this table base and scribe out where those brackets are so that I can take my router and route out those channels. Now, if you'll notice though, on the table base, there's bolts that stick up. So I can't route just one single plane because it'll sit on the bolts. So what I ended up doing was routing out a single plane first and then coming back in and routing a deeper channel just where those bolts are sticking up. That way the bolts can sit down in the groove, and then the metal part of those brackets are actually sitting flat on the wood that's routed out. And you can see right there, it actually worked out perfect. And these legs are starting to look really good. At this point, we have a table that's really coming together. And the next step is to make sure that all our bolts line up, drill out the holes. In this part, I wish there was an exact way to do it, and I'm still learning. Leave a comment if you know of a better way, but making sure that 6 bolts on each side line up perfect, I'm learning is a little bit tricky, and we did have to widen 2 of the holes because after we did this process, there was 2 of them that weren't exactly lining up, and if they don't, your threaded inserts won't go in. We flipped the table over, and then I had to route out the top. So all that work you saw before was all on the bottom. So now we're routing out the top. The bottom's already routed out. I'm going to do the same thing with my rasp and clean up all the corners. You can also see we cut out with a jigsaw 2 squares in the center, and those are for the outlets that are going to be installed. I'm going to take my new Mirka Darrow sander that I'm absolutely obsessed with. If you don't feel like it's worth the money to invest in a Mirka sander, and again, I'm not sponsored by Mirka. I bought it with my own money, but I do think it is a great sander. And now we're looking pretty good. We're going to add our Rubio monocoat. This is the natural color. I did end up coming back, sanding, and putting a coat of pure so that it wasn't as whitewashed. Just a note to self and to you guys, if you're dealing with white oak and you do natural, it does come out more whitewashed than natural. So you want to make sure that's what your client wants before you end up doing it, or else like me, you're going to have to sand and do a coat of pure. And that's what you can see right here. The color is more actual natural and not whitewash. I'm coming back with a final wet sand, and I'm using an 800 grit, and I'm not putting a lot of pressure. I'm just kind of letting the sandpaper glide over, and this is going to knock down just any burrs in that finish. If there's anything sticking up, wipe it down, and this table is very, very smooth. I was very happy with how this was coming out and how it was looking. Now we're walking into the building. This is the room that it's going in. Pretty cool office. So we brought the legs in, and next step was to get some help to bring the top in because we had to turn it on edge, and it's very, very heavy. Of course, when we set it on the legs, I did make a mistake right here. And you'll see in a second. Oh shoot. So this leg has to go on that side. So is it easier to rotate the whole table? Probably. Because yeah, the legs are back. You guys are going right? Yeah. Again, it's hard to get, at least with my skill set right now, every single bracket and routed out section to be identical. So the way that we routed them out is the way that it has to be installed. That way the legs are ensured to be square and in the right place. After that's done, I'm going to put the bolts in the threaded inserts while my employee just stands there and watches. But that's okay. At least he gets paid well to do that. I'll just be on my back putting these inserts. Oh, there he goes. Now he's helping out. Clients do what clients do best, and they start to inspect your work and look for any imperfections so that they can make sure they tell you about it. Especially when they're spending this much money on a table, they're always going to find something. Then a huge dog came and kind of scared the crap out of me while I was on my back. I thought it was a black bear, and ended up being just a giant Rottweiler dog. These are the outlets that are going in. These are really cool outlets I actually found on Amazon. They're brass, and they are slow rise. So when you press the button, they slowly come up. And not that people are just going to sit there and do that all day, but I just think it's kind of cool. Client's still inspecting and waiting to tell me what she thinks is wrong with it, which she did point out a few things that maybe she's right about, but that's the nature of furniture building. There might be one speck here or there. But this is how it came out. I'm extremely happy with the table, and it was a really fun build. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. We'll see you next time.